excited to be here. Well, let me switch over to not that one. Now you should be able to see my slides.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, I'm going to tell you about my journey with visual storytelling, and maybe I'll switch on my camera in the corner. It might hide some stuff, but maybe I'll remember to turn that on and off if I need to. How to be a superhuman communicator. I kind of stumbled onto this kind of by accident. I didn't really set out to be this superhuman communicator. I don't know that I can claim to be a superhuman communicator, but visual storytelling has given me some superpowers to be able to communicate more effectively with the audiences that I speak or write to. So just to tell you about my journey, 2015 was a very pivotal year in my life so far. And leading up to that, from 2011 to 2014, I had started speaking at conferences and meetups, and mostly technical talks. You know, at the time I was doing things like .NET or web applications, or talking about Node.js and some other technologies. And I was getting better, progressively better as a speaker and a presenter. But if I could sum up how I was feeling about the impact that I was having on people who walked away from my talks, it was kind of like, I was not having the effect that I wanted to have. People thought I was a good speaker. They would give me high ratings, or give me positive feedback, told me that I did a great job, you know, and that kind of thing. They were pleasant and kind, but I felt like people weren't walking away excited about the things that I was talking about, or, you know, really, I wasn't motivating people or having, you know, the real impact that I wanted to have. So, as a lot of people do, right? YouTube. I turned to YouTube and to try to find what can I do to be a better speaker, to be a better presenter. And I came across this guy giving a presentation at Google called Show and Tell. And it's a man named Dan Rome. And it's like a 45-minute presentation. And he's written a book called Show and Tell. And it's one of the books that I recommend that you check out. But in this video, he demonstrates how using things like stick figures and shapes and lines and arrows, just doing, you know, really, really simple drawings, can have such an impact on an audience, how it's so much more engaging. And the light bulb went off, and I just fell in love. I mean, I'm like, man, I want to try that. That looks like something I would really enjoy doing. Now, keep in mind, I am not an artist. I can consider myself to be an artist today, but in 2015, I had not drawn in years. The last time I had drawn anything was when I was in school, like in middle school.
A lot of my observations. So I want to just give you some feedback on.
Sorry about that. No, we're all good.
Yeah, maybe that was for someone else. So I decided I was going to give this a try. I had a new talk coming up for the Orlando Code Camp, And I decided I had an old iPad and a cheap $5 stylus, and I was going to be giving a presentation on Kanban, which is a visualizing work and how to manage work visually using the Kanban board. Again, I kind of had this light bulb aha moment, like I'm talking about visualization of work, and what better way to talk about that than to have visuals as part of my presentation. So I drew things like these guys standing in front of a Kanban board. And, you can see I was struggling. I was brand new to drawing, and the software that I was using to draw with was not all that easy to use at the time. The using the iPad was a little bit frustrating, but in the end, I was able to create some graphics for the talk that I was giving, and they were a lot of fun. I fell in love with so much that I set out with a goal of like, hey, I'm going to do 5 slides. In the end, I ended up doing almost every single slide for this presentation hand drawn, including bullet points like this, where I'm talking about the 4 practices of Kanban. If I could visualize my audience before I started drawing, it was kind of like bored, distracted, looking around, not real happy, to that day that I gave my talk. I knew within the first 5 minutes that this was a game changer. The audience was far more engaged. They were laughing and smiling at me and enjoying my presentation. They were, nobody was distracted on their phones or looking anywhere else. They were like focused on the edge of their seats with everything that I was showing them. And if that weren't enough, like I knew that made such a huge difference. And I'll talk more about that in a moment, about what a difference it made for me as a speaker. At the end of the day, there was a guy who I saw running across the parking lot, and I'm thinking, well, that's weird. I don't, is he anxious to get home? And then I realized, wait a minute, he's running to me. Well, this guy, I was a bit frightened at first, but he runs up to me and he says, I just wanted you to know that your talk that you gave this morning was the best talk that I went to today, and I absolutely loved your presentation style. And he's just gushing over and over all these things, and he almost had me in tears. Now, I did not magically become a better speaker overnight. I owe it all to the visuals that I created and how those visuals empowered me to be a better speaker and a better communicator. You remember when you were in school and you took notes? There's something about the act of writing, that as you're listening to something that the teacher is talking about, you're taking notes, you're just writing down maybe a word or a phrase, or making a list of things. When you go back and look at those notes, you can remember a lot more than just the words that you wrote on your page, right? There's a connection that gets made in your brain as you learn, that you associate those things that you wrote on your paper with all kinds of information that's stored in your brain. And that visual information, the notes that you took, unlock that. You can like, oh yeah, I remember what that was about. And you can recall a lot more information. Well, the same holds true for drawing visuals for a talk or a presentation or something that you may be giving. What I discovered was that as I was drawing a slide, I would be thinking about all those things that I wanted to talk about. And when that slide came up on the screen, I was shocked to discover how easy it was for me to talk about all those things, how easy it was for me to recall all that information without having to rely on notes or anything else. It helped me to be a better presenter. What I have found through the power of visuals and communication, using visual storytelling, is I can have a far greater impact on my audiences because I can tell my story the way that I want to tell it. I don't have to rely on clip art or try to coerce my presentation to fit some clip art that I found online, or waste hours trying to find some kind of clip art or image that goes along with the story that I want to tell. It helps me, like I was just talking about, it helps me to remember more of what I want to say. It helps me to be more comfortable. My slides are not only visually engaging, but at the same time, me being comfortable and more natural helps me to be more engaging as a speaker. Now, giving that first talk in 2015, I fell in love with drawing. It made such a, like I had never gotten that kind of feedback before. And I fell in love with drawing, and it became kind of a hobby for me. Like I wanted to keep doing it. I didn't have a new presentation, so I kept drawing silly things and posting them on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and, you know, LinkedIn and social media and stuff like that. And I found they became my outlet for drawing the things that I was having fun with. And I learned in the open. So I'm completely self-taught. I just experiment and find things that work for me. And eventually, my drawings ended up, you know, people were interested in my artwork. They would want some of my artwork as stickers or buy some of my artwork as t-shirts. And then eventually I started drawing avatars for people because I started drawing avatars for myself, and people thought that was really cool, and they wanted me to draw one for them as well. I'm just telling you my story as it's come to pass. This is not me pitching a sales pitch for any of the things that I do on the side, but I enjoy it so much, and it has become part of everything that I do. Now, visual communication has been around for as long as there's been communication. You know, before there was text, there were hieroglyphics and cave paintings and other ways that people told stories that would, you know, use drawings as a way to communicate those things. The thing is, 40% of the nerves that are connected to your brain come from your retinas. And about 90% of the input that your brain receives is visual information. Our brains can process images about 60,000 times faster than text. You know, you've heard the phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's an understatement, because our brains within seconds can pick up so much information out of a picture. Pictures do so many things for us, and our brains, that information is kind of like visual candy to our brains. Our brains are highly tuned machines when it comes to processing visual information. We can see faces in things that aren't faces at all, right? Because our brains are so focused on finding facial features in objects and things all over. Arthur Doler gave a talk at one of the conferences that I attended years ago, talking about how we learn. And no better quote I could pick for hand-drawn illustrations is that our brains love to be surprised. Your hand-drawn illustrations are unique, and even if the artwork is not, let's say, quotey finger, good, it's still interesting and still entertaining. We see a picture that someone has drawn. Maybe it's, a stick figure, and maybe it's not drawn very well. That doesn't matter. Our brains look at that and go, wow, I've never seen that before. And it becomes really, really engaging. Your hand-drawn illustrations, whether it be for a talk or for a post or documentation or whatever it can be, it's going to be like brain candy to other people who see it, no matter how good the artwork may be. So I believe that visual storytelling, visual information, hand-drawn illustrations can help you to communicate faster. It can help you to remember things longer. It can help the people that you're communicating to remember things longer because they associate those visuals with the information that you're giving them. You can use visuals to help generate ideas together that can make presentations, say in an office, much more entertaining and be able to be more creative. Visuals can make something that's really complex much more simple. I don't know if you've ever had to write documentation, but to write out every single detailed step of a process or how things interact or how things relate, it can get really hard and really tedious to make all that stuff appear in text. And maybe when you can perfectly describe everything that you need to in a single illustration, that's so much easier to understand and to visualize. Drawing helps you to be more creative, and it helps, as you're collaborating with other people, help to get those creative juices flowing, and you can certainly generate a lot more ideas together that way. And dadgummit, drawing is fun. You might, maybe you don't think so right now because maybe you think you can't draw. I'm gonna address that in just a moment. But I have so much fun drawing, and I think you can have a whole lot of fun doing it too. I want to give you permission right now to have some fun with things that you need to communicate. Who says you can't add some fun illustrations to your next report or your analysis, or to documentation that you need to write at work, or a blog post that somebody's asked you to create? Why not have some fun? There's nothing wrong with it. People will enjoy it, and you'll have a lot more fun with it too. Drawings help us to easily show relationships, to make those complex things clear and easy to understand. It can make data more interesting. It's a superpower that make you more persuasive and convincing. You can add humor to your drawings. This is something that I love to do. And most people, unless they had their sense of humor surgically removed, they enjoy to be entertained during presentations, right? Nobody wants to sit through a boring death by PowerPoint presentation where it's bullet point after bullet point after bullet point of walls of text. Nobody wants to see that. It can help you to explain a process so much easier. Like, let's use this as an example. Like, hey, I have an idea. I'm going to take this idea and I'm going to write it down and describe it and everything, and then I'm going to share it with some other people, and then those people are going to give me feedback on this idea, which can lead me to say, okay, that was a terrible idea. Time to start over again. So you can create, through a series of images, describe how you get from point A to B to C and all those kinds of things, right? And it can be so much more fun and engaging than just, writing step 1, step 2, step 3 in text. All right, now let's address your drawing skills. If you can draw shapes, triangles, circles, squares, that kind of thing, and I am 99.999% sure that you can draw some shapes. You did that in kindergarten, right? You can do it today. If you can draw some lines and some arrows, I think you can do that. You can draw some blobs. That's not too hard. You can just put pencil to paper and just randomly create some blobs. And you know how to draw your letters and numbers, right? I think you can do that. You can start to compose some things that maybe you didn't even realize that you could do. Now you can start with stick figures, and that's almost all you need. Stick figures are very expressive. There are some techniques that you can learn on drawing that aren't very hard to do with stick figures that you can use to express lots of emotions, lots of actions, lots of different things through stick figures. And I still use them in all of my presentations. They are extremely powerful. You can start to compose shapes together like squares and triangles and be able to draw things that maybe you didn't realize you could draw. Like take a city sky landscape, for example. You probably thought you couldn't draw one of those. Well, it doesn't have to be perfect. But when you see something like that, hey, that kind of looks like a skyline. You can draw things like a bicycle, just using simple shapes, circles, lines, a triangle. Now, is this the most accurate, realistic looking bicycle you've ever seen? No. But that's the beauty of it. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be an artist to convey your information, to convey what you want, the message that you want to get across. When that picture came up, you instantly recognized it as a bicycle, right? That's all it takes is kind of like creating icons. It doesn't have to be visually rich with all different colors and look 3D or look photorealistic. It just has to convey a message. If you can draw a blob, you can draw the most popular thing in technology right now, the cloud. Or the second most popular thing, a pile of JavaScript. Now, are you going to be, say you love to play basketball. Are you going to be as good as Michael Jordan? No, none of us, especially me, because I put too much priority on food. I could not play. I don't think I could ever play as well as Michael Jordan. However, I can learn the game. I can learn the rules. I can have a lot of fun, and I can enjoy the game with other people without playing at the same level as Michael Jordan. Or maybe bowling is more my speed. I don't have to be a professional bowler to enjoy the game of bowling. You can throw a ball and hit some pins, maybe sometimes knock them all over. The point I want to make is that your drawing ability, you don't have to be Picasso. Well, Picasso was pretty abstract. You don't have to be, you don't have to draw the Mona Lisa and expect that, you know, your artwork is going to be in a museum. That's not the goal. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to have fun and to be able to communicate your ideas more effectively. And you don't have to be a professional or a real artist to be able to do those things. So I want to encourage you that you can draw. I believe that you can draw. What are some ways that you can get started? Well, you can use, you know, a sketchbook and pens and pencils and do those kinds of things. Another alternative is to use like a lap board that is like a small dry erase board that you can draw on and easily erase it, and then scan it in using something like Google's photo scan. You can upgrade to something like a digital drawing tablet to connect to your computer without spending a whole lot of money. But the best thing that's out there today, if you want to learn to do digital artwork and have that go straight into your documents or straight into your presentations, is the iPad. The iPad is by far the best drawing experience you can have today. For $329 and a $99 Apple Pencil, for less than $500, you can have an amazing drawing experience. You can also use it with iPad, and there's an iPad Air today. There's a new iPad Air coming out later this year, and those are all amazing. The apps that are available for iPad are phenomenal. You can use other devices too. Surface, like the Surface Books, the Surface Go, Surface Pros, they all have great technology. I would say that the drawing apps that are available aren't as good as what you can get on the iPad. There's a guy named Brad Colbo that I follow on YouTube who does tons and tons of reviews on tech reviews for creative professions, for people who draw and illustrate, and or people who do that as a hobby, like myself. And he's got tons of reviews, and he's got great information on if you want to go that route of drawing. People ask me a lot, well, what do I use? What do I use for the work that I create, the slides that I create in my presentations? I use an iPad Pro and with the Apple Pencil, and for the most part, for most of the illustrations that I create for my presentations and my blog posts that I write, the visuals that I create for some of the tutorials that I publish on YouTube and so forth, I'm using an app called Sketches Pro, which I think is either $5 or $10. Typical Apple ecosystem. You pay a lot for the hardware, but then the apps are really cheap, and they are amazing. I've got some resources that are available on my website. If you go to this address, bit.ly/draw-awesome, it's an article that I published on my website that lists, tells some of the same story that I've told you, and gets into some of the books and videos that I recommend. So I'll put this link up later on, but I want to turn the presentation over to, one, I want to answer any questions that you have, and two, I want to show you some techniques that you can use to start drawing your own visuals. So before I do that, before I get into drawing itself, do you have any questions about any of my story or the content that I've shared so far, or any reservations that you may have against drawing? And maybe I can address those for you.
Hey, David. Thanks for your talk this afternoon.
Welcome.
You started to talk about your story and how you started with speaking, and then you started incorporating your drawings into this. And I know you spoke to this a little bit, but could you go a little bit deeper into how you think incorporating the drawing and the graphics into your presentations has actually changed or improved your talks? Like some of the more
Yeah. So there's some specific things that using hand-drawn illustrations has done for the presentations that I gave, or that I give. One is being able to tell my story the way that I want to. In the previously, before I started using hand-drawn illustrations, I was kind of forced into looking for that image or that clip art or something that I wanted to associated with whatever I was speaking about. And usually I had to compromise my message to fit some, like, well, this is the best image I could find, so I've got to kind of craft my message around this image that's on the slide, and maybe I'm not telling it exactly the way I want to, or the flow that I want to, because I'm kind of hampered by the visuals that I can get a hold of out of some clip art gallery or whatever. The other thing is, it helped me to be a better speaker because it helped me to remember the things that I wanted to say. So one, it made me more comfortable as a speaker, where I can be more natural in giving my presentation, and it helped me to remember all the things that I wanted to say, because of that connection that's made in your brain between writing something down by hand. Same happens when you're drawing. As you're thinking about all those things, it helps to solidify all those kinds of things in your brain that you want to say. And it helped me to just be more engaging, that I'm able to use my own style of humor in the talks that I give. And so the visuals that I create include, some of my own personality in them. And it doesn't matter, how poorly drawn they are, it's still, it's part of who I am. And now I can be much more entertaining with the talks that I give. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right. Well, I am going to switch gears here and do something a little interesting. I am going to show you some things that I do to draw, and it will help jumpstart your journey on drawing as well. So what I've got here is an iPad, the iPad that I use for everything. And the drawing app that I use is called Sketches Pro that I mentioned. It's, like I said, it's like $5 or $10 in the store. And it's not as full featured as some of the other drawing apps out there. And to me, that is the feature. The feature is it's easy to use, and it's got some great tools and tips that are available. So I'm not going to go through like the entire interface and all that stuff because, you know, it depends on what you're doing. You may have a different app that you would prefer to use, or a different kind of device, or maybe you're just drawing on pen and paper, and that's fine too. But I wanted to reiterate that using just shapes and arrows and things like that, you can really create some engaging visuals that you can use in your presentations or in articles or documentation that you write or whatever. So this is kind of my go-to when I am creating visuals. There's lots of colors to choose from. I'm going to choose black, and I intentionally use black and white a lot of times in my presentations because they have the highest contrast, and you never know what kind of quality projector you may be using when you go to give a presentation, or the quality of someone's screen as they're looking at your visuals through their monitor or whatever. So the higher contrast, the better. And, you know, another thing to keep in mind is that there are people who have visual impairments. And so having higher contrast will help those folks be more engaged and be able to enjoy your presentations as well. So as I mentioned before, stick figures are such a powerful tool to communicate. And you can draw things like circles for hands. So you don't have to learn how to draw hands. You can just draw a circle on the end of the stick, and that can be, you know, what they're showing, some action that they're doing. And then of course, stick figures can be very expressive. You can draw, you know, the parts of the face. You don't have to draw a nose. You can draw, you can change the expression of your stick figures and show different types of emotion. You can show, use angry eyebrows, and, you know, quickly change, you know, any type of expression. So there's like a number of techniques that you can learn that can make your stick figures much more expressive and do things. I will create another drawing here and show how you may draw a stick figure, and just by using a box instead of just one single line, you can make a stick figure look like they're doing some kind of action, like running or lifting or pushing, or, you know, lots of different things. There's a couple of books in the resources that I linked to in that bit.ly link that I'll share again at the end, that show you how to do things like this, where you can use different techniques to really be more expressive with stick figures. And so let's take, for example, if you want to do this is what I'm about to show you makes up about 95% of the illustrations that I draw for the talks that I give. And if you're going to draw with a digital device like a tablet, let's imagine that I'm drawing maybe a jar of something, maybe a jar of peanut butter, who knows. I can think of that in my mind, what a jar of peanut butter looks like, or I can go and look on the internet for a jar of peanut butter and import that into my drawing and put that in the corner and use that as a reference that I can look at it while I'm sketching it. Or I can import a photo and put it on another layer and use that to draw on, to trace over the top of it. There is no shame. Let me be clear. Let me turn on my image so that you can see me. There is no shame in tracing. I trace all the time. A lot of the things that I do, maybe there's some of the funny things you may have seen me post on social media or some of the things you may find on my website. A lot of those are created by me tracing some kind of outline on top of them, just so that I get the proportions correct, or in the right position, or that it doesn't look too out of shape. And then I'll go back, I'll hide the reference photo, and then I'll do the rest of it, however I want to. But to be clear, there is no shame at all in tracing. Every artist does it to one degree or another, whether it's tracing over their own sketches or tracing over some other photo or using a photo as a reference. It's all, you got to use something in the real world to go by. All right, so back to the drawing. If what I will do is I will draw an outline on one layer, and then I'll add another layer underneath, and this will be the layer that I use for coloring. So let's take maybe a brown color, and I'll fill this in. I'll use my handy dandy fill tool to I remember how to do it. Try this again. So I'll use a fill tool to fill in the entire space, and then maybe I'll choose a different color for the label and the cap. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that I would do to create some silly illustration to put in a lot of the artwork that I create. So I'll use the mistake that a lot of people make, and the mistake that I made when I first started, was that I treated the digital domain just like I was drawing on a piece of paper, where I would draw my outline, and then I would try to carefully fill in the color on the inside. And you don't have to do that. You can use layers to add, to build up from the bottom, stack on top of each other, different colors, different shading, and you don't have to be very careful about drawing outside the lines. So if I draw outside the lines here, you see I'm not damaging the black that's sitting on top, and I can come back with an eraser and erase that stuff I don't need. So that is it in a nutshell, what I do. Now I'll add one more layer here and show you something. A lot of drawing apps have this thing called layer modes, where you can change a layer from not just like an opaque or normal mode, but to like a darkening mode, or a multiply mode, or a lightening mode, where it lightens up colors instead of darkens them. So I'm changing that layer to a multiply mode, And what's going to happen is if I choose something like a gray color and I draw on top of that color below, or the color that I'm drawing on top of, it multiplies that gray with whatever color is underneath to create, use it for shading, like a shadow. Like if I draw over here, you see that color is gray because it's on top of white. Whereas here, it's taking that gray and it's making it a darker shade of yellow, a darker shade of brown. Really powerful technique, and you can draw something that's visually interesting in a matter of seconds. Now, do you have any questions? I could draw for as long as you want me to, but that's for another time. I have a Twitch channel and a YouTube channel where I draw and show people how I draw things. So, you can join me on one of those if you're really interested in watching me draw something. I like the hand claps. I haven't seen that in Zoom. So that's how I draw in a nutshell. I'm self-taught, and that's most of my technique right there. You now have all my secrets, and you can go forth and do some amazing drawing yourself.